Death at Rottingdean, Chapter 2. The principal green properties are the elms, the flint wall of which now forms the northern boundary of the green, the Dean on the south, and North End House to the west. Each is a house with history, and each was once the home of some of Rottingdean's most illustrious and remarkable characters. Writers, poets, painters, and prime ministers, judges, politicians, actors, racehorse trainers, country squires, and eccentrics, all have lived around the green at one time or another, and some still do. Henry Blyth, Smuggler's Village, The Story of Rottingdean. I must say, my lord, you have the markings of a first-rate motor car mechanic. From the driver's seat, Kate smiled down at her husband, who, stripped to his shirt-sleeves at the noonday sun, knelt by the front wheel, patiently repairing yet another tire. "But you really must speak with the Home Secretary about the shocking state of these Sussex roads," she added archly. Charles pushed back a shock of brown hair with a dirty hand. "What was that about the Home Secretary?" "Nails," Kate said succinctly. "In the roads. Can't someone do something? This is the third flat tire we've had this morning. These roads collected horseshoe nails for centuries, before anyone thought of a pneumatic tire," Charles said. "I dare say it will be a few more years before all of them have been retrieved. In the interim, it is not the Home Secretary, but the parish council that—" The last few words were drowned out by a loud hiss. Kate smiled as she watched the tire swell to its proper size and seat itself on the rim. Instead of using the frightfully inefficient hand pump, Charles inflated flat tires from a missile cylinder formerly filled with the oxygen he used to power the limelight for his photography, now filled with compressed air, a device that demonstrated his inventive turn of mind. Few gentlemen of her husband's social rank, he was the Baron of Somersworth, turned a hand to anything practical merit, or demeaned themselves with physical labor, or did anything real. But Charles, quite astoundingly, did all three, and she loved him for it. While her husband put away his tools, Kate adjusted her hat and motoring veil, smiling to herself. Despite the tires that went flat with maddening frequency and the necessity of carrying a supply of extra petrol, she was delighted with her new Panhard, a truly revolutionary automobile with its engine in front and a wheel for steering instead of a tiller. The French automobile had been obtained for her by Charlie Rhodes, who raced it in publicity competition. She had met Mr. Rhodes during such a competition the previous year when she commandeered his automobile, stole it, according to one journalist's account of the event, to drive to Charles' rescue, a terrible trip of 15 miles at speeds of nearly 20 miles an hour. The feat, an unusually reckless one for a lady, had given her a certain celebrity in motoring circles. With this reputation, Mr. Rhodes had not found it difficult to convince the manufacturer of the marketing advantages to be had by equipping Lady Sheridan with the most modern machine. And so Kate had received her first automobile. Charles could hardly say no. Charles shrugged into his long duster and settled his goggles over his eyes again. "Brighton is only a mile or so, and I thought we might have lunch at the old Ship. I asked Lawrence to meet us there so we could go on to Rottingdean together." He started the engine, then climbed into the passenger seat and touched his fingers to the brim of his cap. "Shall we soldier on, my dear? Our seaside holiday awaits." Steering the motor car toward Brighton and a quiet lunch, Kate thought how good it was to see her husband smile. When she agreed to become his wife, she'd known that their marriage would be difficult. She was an American and Irish, old enough to have lived her own life and independent enough to insist on her freedoms. He was the son of a wealthy and aristocratic British family that seemed bound to the past by every imaginable tradition. The best she could hope for was that their love for one another, a love that had grown and deepened in the 18 months of their marriage, would help to ease the worst of the inevitable bumps in the road ahead. And so it had for a time. Charles' mother, the Dowager Lady Somersworth, had been bitterly opposed to her son's marriage and made no secret of her dislike for her Irish-American daughter-in-law. The newlywed couple had taken up residence at Bishop's Keep, the Essex manor Kate had inherited, and avoided visiting Charles's family. Now Kate looked back on that quiet, happy time with a regretful pleasure, for a momentous change had overtaken them, testing their love and making the past 9 months desperately difficult. At Christmas of the year before, Charles's brother Robert, the 4th Baron of Somersworth, had died. The elder brother's death was not unexpected, and it finally visited upon Charles the obligations of the peerage, which both he and Kate had anticipated with some dread. Charles' newfound responsibilities opened a new era in their marriage. From then on, Kate felt nothing had been the same. Now the 5th Baron of Somersworth, Charles seemed determined to do his duty. He saw to his brother's funeral and assumed the management of the estates, both in England and Ireland. When Parliament sat in late January, he moved to the family's large London mansion and took his seat in the House of Lords. Because Kate felt it was her duty to be with Charles, she went with him and tried as best she could to play her role in society. London in the season, with money to spend, a splendid home and nothing to do but enjoy herself, what more could she want? But it hadn't been a happy time. Charles was remote, occupied with meetings all day and sessions in the house at night. London was dirty and noisy, and Kate pined for easy freedoms of her rural life at Bishop's Keep, where she had tended her gardens, managed her own household, and ridden her bicycle to the village. The London house was a mausoleum, immense, uninviting, and efficiently managed by a housekeeper who made it chillingly plain to the new Baroness that she wasn't welcome below stairs. While Kate had enjoyed vigorous health in the country, she was quickly exhausted by the interminable whirlwind of London social life. Morning rides in Hyde Park, afternoons spent shopping and making calls, evening soirees and dinners, glittering balls that went on till 3 in the morning. She had also tried hard to keep up with her writing, for Kate had already published a number of fictions and wanted to do more. And on top of that, there was the work she had undertaken for the Countess of Warwick, who had asked her to see to the problems of the orphanage in the parish of George the Martyr. Kate sighed to herself, thinking back over the hectic spring and early summer. Perhaps it was the exhaustion that had led to their great tragedy. If only she had had the sense to take better care of herself. If only she had gone home to Bishop's Keep in April when she learned she was pregnant, instead of agreeing to help the Countess with yet another of her impractical schemes to improve the lives of slum children. "I hope," Charles said loudly over the clatter of the engine, "that you will like Rottingdean. It's a very little village after all, with only a few families." "I'm sure I don't care," Kate said, "as long as you're there. In fact, I shall be glad for some time alone together. It would be such a relief with no luncheon appointments, no dinner engagement, no balls or parties, not even any servants except for their own, Amelia and Lawrence. She might even be able to get back to the book she had started writing so many months before, which was fearfully overdue at her publishers." Charles nodded and went on. "But they are interesting families. The Burne-Joneses have a house on the one side of the green, the painter, you know, and his wife. She is quite an independent woman, I understand, with a great many ideas of her own. Stanley and Lucy Baldwin, you met them both, visit Lucy's parents, the Ridsdales, who live on another corner of the green, and the Kiplings have taken a house nearby. Rudyard's wife is an American, Caroline, her name is." He paused. "Perhaps while we are there we should host a dinner or evening's entertainment." Kate's heart sank. She admired the painting of Edward Burne-Jones, who was associated with the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. She had planned to take some time to study the stained-glass windows that he and his fellow artist, William Morris, had created for the parish church. She would like, as well, to meet Lady Burne-Jones, about whom she had already learned a great deal. But as for dinner or a party, "We didn't come to Rottingdean for company," she protested. "We were to have a private holiday with time to walk on the beach and among the downs." They were to have time, she hoped, to recapture the pleasure in one another's company that had seemed to elude them in London, to return, perhaps, to the charm of the early days of their marriage, when all seemed so right and full of promise. "Yes, of course," Charles said, "but I'm sure you and Caroline Kidlin would get along famously. She has a new baby, a boy, I understand, just over a month old." And then he stopped and turned to her, stricken, and she saw in his cherry-brown eyes what she knew was in his heart, an overwhelming sadness at the loss of their own child, and at the awful knowledge that there could never be a son, at least not her son, to fulfill the obligations of his lineage.